comes too early, hands already warm, working for a better day, trying to keep me warm.
The Mystery of the Times is our title for this second session on the book of Ecclesiastes. Chapter 3, which we will read today, begins with one of the most quoted passages of the Bible. Pete Seeger wrote a song in 1959 that was first released in 1962 by the Limelighters with the title, "To Everything There Is a Season." Pete Seeger and Judy Collins also recorded versions of that song, but in 1965 the folk rock group The Byrds released a version titled "Turn, Turn, Turn" that reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in December 1965. Except for the title, "Turn, Turn, Turn," the lyrics consist entirely of the first 8 verses of the 3rd chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes. You already know them, but we will read those verses in a few minutes, along with the rest of chapter 3, which is only 22 verses long. We will also read chapter 4 in this session, which is also fairly short, which deals with toil, human relations, and political power. We're going to talk about the language and repetition used in the book of Ecclesiastes. What is Kohelet trying to tell us anyway? But we begin with a prayer. O God, our Father, open our eyes and enlighten our minds as we study your word. So grant that our minds may know your truth and our hearts may feel your love, and then confirm and strengthen our wills that we may go out to live what we have learned. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. In the first 2 chapters, Kohelet uses the phrase chasing after wind 4 times, and 9 times overall in the first 6 chapters. We have said that Ecclesiastes uses cadence and repetition as a principal literary device, and the catchphrase chasing after wind is a primary example. Its first appearance is in chapter 1, verse 14. I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see all is vapor and a chasing after wind. The Hebrew underlying the translation chase is actually 2 words, reut and rayon. It appears to be related to an Aramaic word meaning pleasure, will, ambition, desire. A similar Aramaic root has the meaning to feed or to graze, to shepherd. In the first case, the meaning would be to desire or to pursue the wind, and in the second, to guide or direct the wind. In either case, the image describes an impossible task. You cannot pursue the wind, and you cannot guide the wind. You cannot control something that is elusive. Anyone who engages in such endeavors is sure to find frustration and disappointment. Kohelet first uses this phrase in his quest to make sense of the world and human experience. He told us this quest turned out to be vapor or chasing the wind, then gave us a proverb. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. It's significant that he does not deny that he gained great wisdom, surpassing all those who ruled before him. Why then the judgment that all of this was but a chasing after wind? The answer came in a second proverb. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and those who increase knowledge increase sorrow. Robert Alter translates this as, for in much wisdom is much worry, and he who adds wisdom adds pain. The second proverb is a consequence of the first. A world that resists comprehension means that acquiring much wisdom can only bring a keener sense of wisdom's limits. The image of chasing after the wind shows frustration and disillusionment of a venture that does not repay the effort. The emphasis is on the futile nature of the endeavor. Yet the image of chasing wind has a certain flexibility in terms of emphasis that we will see in a sequence of proverbs evaluating various aspects of work and income in verse 6 of chapter 4. Let's look at that verse. Better is a handful with quiet than 2 handfuls with toil and a chasing after wind. Here, Kohelet weighs the value of hard toil for a higher return against the merits of moderate toil for a lower yield. Not surprisingly, he finds in favor of the handful with rest and quiet. Since Kohelet is not denying that one can obtain more with more effort, the thrust of the image is not futility. In this case, it is more the wearing nature of pursuing wind that is at play. In adding the familiar phrase chasing after wind, Kohelet effectively reinforces the point of the saying. Less gained in rest and quiet is better than twice that amount gained with exertion and effort. Look at verse 4 of the same chapter. Then I saw that all toil and all skill in work come from one person's envy of another. This also is vanity and a chasing after wind. Here he claims that all toil and all skill and work spring from a single source, envy. Again, he does not question the positive end product of the competitive urge, proficiency and excellence. Nonetheless, he pronounces this scrambling, get-ahead mentality a chasing after wind. Implicit here may be recognition that the toll such ambitious striving takes. So we have seen that at times chasing after wind can emphasize the futility of an endeavor. Chasing after wind results only in frustration and disillusionment. At other times, chasing after wind doesn't imply futility, but that the trade-off of extra work or toil is not enough to justify the extra reward. Sometimes chasing after wind can mean chasing after nothing, and at other times chasing after wind means chasing after something. It's just that what you get is not worth the effort. Kohelet uses metaphor throughout this book, the point here being that the repeated usage of the same metaphorical phrase should not always be interpreted to mean the same thing. With that, we begin chapter 3 in the mystery of the times. The poem we read in verses 1 through 8 is followed by a prose addendum in verses 10 through 15, a kind of literary coda that is crucial to understand the meaning of verses 1 through 8. In between, in verse 9, we have a question. So, chapter 3, the first 8 verses. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to throw away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to throw away. A time to tear, and a time to sow. A time to keep silent, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time for war, and a time for peace. So this section begins with a statement affirming that for every affair under heaven there is an appropriate moment. Again, we see the phrase under heaven. This is followed by 7 paired lines, with the number 7 probably chosen because of its traditional association with the sacred. Each half line is very short, mostly containing only 2 accented syllables: born, die, plant, uproot, kill, weep, laugh, etc. The notion of a right time for everything is a theme woven throughout the teachings of conventional wisdom. For the sages, timing is everything. For example, Proverbs 15:23 says to make an apt answer is a joy to anyone, and a word in its time, how good it is. The first chapter of Suresh, verses 23 and 24. Those who are patient stay calm until the right moment, and then cheerfulness comes back to them. They hold back their words until the right moment, and then the lips of many tell of their good sense. The task of the sage is to determine the exact right moment for acting and speaking, or to refrain from acting and speaking. This timing function that Kohelet discusses in Ecclesiastes seems to resolve several problems that we see in Proverbs. There are some Proverbs that seem to directly contradict other Proverbs. We're going to look at Proverbs 26, verses 4 and 5 as an example. Do not answer the fools according to their folly, lest you be a fool yourself. Answer fools according to their folly. lest they be wise in their own eyes. This seems to make no sense whatsoever, especially because these two proverbs are back to back. First, we are told not to answer a fool according to his folly. Then immediately after that, we are told to answer a fool according to his folly. These look like directly contradictory statements. But then we think about Ecclesiastes chapter 3, where we are given a series of directly opposite ideas and are told there is a time for each, a time to be born and a time to die. It is really a matter of timing. Sometimes one of these applies, other times the other one. Sometimes it is best not to answer a fool according to his folly, but at other times we should answer the fool according to his folly. It just requires some discernment. The wise man knows the difference. In chapter 8, Kohelet refers to this wisdom theme in the context of advising counselors in the royal court. Whoever obeys a command will meet no harm, and the wise man will know the time and the way. The theme used here suggests the possibility that Kohelet has adopted a composition that originally concerned the wisdom topic of discernment of the right time. Let's go on to verse 9. What gain have the workers from their toil? So this verse, together with the ones that follow, may spell out the philosophic point of the catalog of times. The contradictory events of human life, both good and bad, are beyond man's control. At one moment he may be called upon to laugh and another to weep, but he can scarcely hope to gain anything from this alternating pattern that he didn't even determine himself. So let's go on to verses 10 through 15 and see if we can figure out some more about what's going on here. Verse 10. I have seen the business that God has given to everyone to be busy with. He has made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, he has put a sense of past and future into their minds. Yet they cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I know that there is nothing better for them than to be happy and enjoy themselves as long as they live. Moreover, it is God's gift that all should eat and drink and take pleasure in all their toil. I know that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done this so that all should stand in awe before him. That which is already has been. That which is to be already is. And God seeks out what has gone by. With verses 10 and 11, Kohelet resumes his language of personal reflection. While the poem did not identify an agent behind the numerous times listed, Kohelet now identifies God as the one who makes everything happen in its time. The references to timing suggest that this refers to God's ongoing activity in the world with respect to the events of human life, not the creation story. The main point is that it is God who controls events. Verse 11 states that God does everything. The rhythms of our lives are not in our control. It is God who brings events to pass. We also notice that God has put a sense of past and future in our minds. Yet people cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. There is an irony here. God has placed within the human consciousness some sense of the larger scope of time and the cosmos. Still, this awareness is only sufficient to tell us what we do not know. In fact, it is our capacity to be aware of ourselves as beings in time that also makes us aware of the contingencies that such condition places on us. We know enough to know that we do not grasp the full course of human affairs, what God has done from the start to the finish. Humans are like the desperately nearsighted, inching their way along some great tapestry or fresco in an attempt to take it in. The business God has given humans is identified as the endeavor to comprehend the work of God, a pursuit destined for failure. Verse 13 tells us that this is a gift from God, that we are urged to enjoy the pleasures of life here and now. But Kohelet is perfectly aware that it is a matter of luck or God's unfathomable determination, whether we are given the time and means to enjoy the good things of life, or whether we are condemned to die, to uproot, to rip down, or to mourn. Kohelet hasn't given us an invitation to create our own reality, nor is this a recommendation to accept the bad with the good. It seems to be more an invitation to recognize specifically the good occasion when it comes and be fully prepared to enjoy it. Let's go on to verses 16 through 22 to the end of the chapter. Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, wickedness was there, and in the place of righteousness, wickedness was there as well. I said to myself, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for he has appointed a time for every matter and for every work. I said to myself with regard to humans that God is testing them to show that they are but animals. For the fate of humans and the fate of animals is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and humans have no advantage over the animals, for all is vanity. All go to one place, all are from the dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knows whether the human spirit goes upward and the spirit of animals goes downward to the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than that all should enjoy their work, for that is their lot. Who can bring them to see what will be after them? In verse 19, we have another instance which Kohelet rejects a fundamental premise of the biblical consensus. In the creation story, the human creature is brought into the world after the beast and is told to hold sway over all other living creatures. Here, man and beast are seen to share the same fate of mortality, and there is no qualitative difference between them. This also seems to contrast with Psalm 8, verses 3 through 5. When I look at your heavens and the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are humans that you are mindful of them? Mortals that you care for them? Yet you have made them a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. In verse 21, Kohelet seems to be referring to a new doctrine during that period that imagined the ascent of the soul after death. If so, he seems to be skeptical of that idea. He seems to suspect that the spirit of man and beast both descend into the earth. We're going to move now on to chapter 4, verse 1. Again, I saw all the oppressions that are practiced under the sun. Look, the tears of the oppressed, with no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors, there was power, with no one to comfort them. And I commended the dead who have already died, more than the living who are still alive. But better than both is the one who has not yet been, and has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. We notice in the first verse that Kohelet registers the oppression of the suffering as a given fact without the slightest indication, as in Psalms or elsewhere, that God will rescue them from their suffering, and without any suggestion like that found in Proverbs that we should act to rescue them. Verse 2 seems to be a little redundant. Of course, the dead are already dead and the living are still alive, but this redundancy fits with Kohelet's pointed stylistic use of repetition. But especially strange is the suggestion in the third verse that those who have never been born are better off than the living. There is a similarity with this thought in Job's wish in the 3rd chapter of the book of Job that he had never been born. But Job makes that wish in the face of unbearable suffering. Kohelet throws this idea out as a general philosophic reflection on the human condition. Oblivion is preferable to a state of consciousness. We see here the conflict between those things the sage has been taught and those he has witnessed. Ecclesiastes 3:16 through 4:3 is framed by a troubled contemplation of the most vexing and theological questions. The problem of evil. If God is indeed just and righteous, how is it that injustice happens? If God is God, both powerful and good, How is it that the unspeakable atrocities occur and the perpetrators continue unchecked? God will judge, we are told, but in God's time, and humans are in no way privy to this. He doesn't defend God in this or look for some resolution, but he doesn't seem to find a resolution either. Let's go on to verse 4. Then I saw that all toil and all skill in work come from one person's envy of another. This also is vanity and a chasing after wind. Fools fold their hands and consume their own flesh. Better is a handful with quiet than 2 handfuls with toil and a chasing after wind. The parable about eating one's own flesh, of course, is a metaphor for devastating harm to oneself. The parable in verse 6, one we've already talked about earlier, seems to at least partially contradict the one about eating one's own flesh. Let's read verses 7 and 8. Again, I saw vanity under the sun, the case of solitary individuals without sons or brothers, yet there is no end to all their toil, and their eyes are never satisfied with riches. For whom am I toiling, they ask, and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and an unhappy business. The theme of excessive work and its futility continues, though now in the context of human relationship. In this case, the absurdity of the situation is compounded by the fact that this person is totally missing any human connection, no companion of any sort. Let's read 9 through 12. 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their toil. If they fall, one will lift up the other. But woe to one who is alone and falls and does not have another to help. Again, if 2 lie together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though one might prevail against the other, 2 will withstand one. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. Throughout these lines, the argument for friendship is pragmatic. There's nothing here about companionship or love. 2 lying together does not necessarily imply marriage or sex, especially since what has been envisioned to this point is the advantage gained by a man's having a companion. The whole sequence of the advantages of having a friend takes the proverb form of a succession of numbers, 1, 2, 3. The triple cord, as many scholars have observed, is a citation from the Epic of Gilgamesh, or a saying in general circulation that is quoted in Gilgamesh. In the epic, Gilgamesh urges his friend Enkidu to stick with him in the endeavor to slay the monster Humbaba, declares as evidence of the advantage of joining forces that a towed ship will not sink, because no man can snap the triple cord by which it is fastened. Humbaba is the monster guardian of the cedar forest. In the face of the daunting odds, Gilgamesh seeks to encourage Enkidu by reminding him of the effectiveness of teamwork. Kohelet's own use of the proverb suggests he may well have been familiar with this ancient story. For in both cases, the 3-ply rope is used for the specific, and not necessarily obvious purpose of illustrating the advantage of a twosome. More broadly, Kohelet's telling of a journey with fellow travelers giving each other protection and aid against assault would seem to reflect this ancient story. Let's go on with verses 13 through 16 in the end of the chapter. Better is a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who will no longer take advice. One can indeed come out of prison to reign, even though born poor in the kingdom. I saw all the living who, moving about under the sun, follow that youth who replaced the king. There was no end to all those people whom he led, yet those who came later will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and a chasing after wind. The story may go something like this. A clever boy, a young man, is preferable to a doddering old king, perhaps senile and not even able to look out for his own interests. The boy, once imprisoned, perhaps for debt, and powerless, somehow manages to get out and assume the throne. He, in turn, is succeeded by a third figure like himself. In this chain of succession, no one gets lasting benefit from the exercise of power. In the succession of generations, the leader's power is always precarious because those being led are fickle. All of this constitutes an application to the political realm of Kohelet's idea that it is pointless to amass wealth through toil because there is no way of knowing who will inherit it. That one person is motivated by envy and another by honest pride in work, that one is skilled and another slapdash, that one achieves fame and power through effort and another remains obscure, had no bearing on Kohelet's conclusion. All is vapor. What escapes this pronouncement is worthy of notice: the sharing of life, of toil and risk and harvest. This alone survives inspection, resolving in solidarity even as the things that had seemed substantial, wealth, power, acclaim, turn out to be nothing but shadows. And here is where we will end our second session. In session 3, we will read chapters 5 and 6, portion over profit. I hope you can join us in our discussion Monday evening. If you have not already done so, you can send an email to online.classes@northgateumc.org, and we will send you the Zoom link. Meanwhile, have a good week.
People talk about difference, but I just see the same. Every heart need kindness, every soul need a name, and we're deep. Children laughing somewhere, sounds of better days. Keep the light inside you, don't let the darkness stay. So sing a song for mercy, sing it clear and kind. We all walk this same good earth, just trying to ease our mind.